For the record, my name is Ben Weber, the District 6 City Councilor, and I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Labor, Workforce, and Economic Development. I'm joined today by Vice Chair Julia Mejia. Today is July 1st, 2025. It is now 10:03, otherwise known in some areas of the country as Bobby Bonilla Day. Let you look that up. But in accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcasts on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.labor@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all counselors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of the hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they signed up, and we'll have 2 minutes to testify. If you wish to sign up for public testimony and have not done so, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Shane Pack, at Shane, that's SHANE, .PAC@boston.gov for the Zoom link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on dockets numbered, I don't know how you, plural, dockets number 1188 to 1190, 1192 to 1201, 1264 to 1265, which I will read into the record, well, in part shortly, but we'll be discussing all 15 grants before us. The total number of the grants is $2.6 million to be administered by the Office of Workforce Development, and they will support our career centers, youth employment, workforce job training opportunities for job seekers, and unemployment insurance claimants, as well as regional planning efforts for the creation of regional pipeline programming for high demand industries. Several of the grants are from the U.S. Department of Labor. I'm going to, because there's 15 grants, I think we're going to cover most of these grants. I'm just going to go over the dollar figures for people. They can look up the actual grant. Grant 1188 is for $1.2 million from the Department of Labor. Sorry, give me a second here. From the Department of Labor. Docket number 1189 is for $423,000 from the Treasury Department. Docket number, rather than me talk about these and we'll talk about them again, let's talk to the panelists. So we are joined here, in addition to Vice Chair Mejia, we're joined by Jody Sugarman-Brazen, who's the Deputy Chief of Worker Empowerment for the Worker Empowerment Cabinet. Joseph Lay, who's Chief of Staff for the Worker Empower Cabinet. Katie Gall, who's the Director of Grants for the Worker Empower Cabinet. Devin Wedge has joined us, Senior Director of Administration and Finance. And Doreen, is it Tracy? I'm mispronounced. Tracy. Director,
thank you.
Okay, Director of Workforce Training and Programs for the Worker Empowerment Cabinet. I trust you have divided the grants up. Jody, if you want to start, do you want to just tell us what grants you can address?
Sure, I'm happy to, but I think our Director of Grants, Katie Gall, is the person to kick things off here. I'll be addressing just one grant today, the one from Citizens Bank for our Boston Climate Ready Workforce Grant. Joseph Lee will be handling a couple of other discretionary grants to our Power Core program and our YOU program, but Katie will be handling the bulk of today's, especially funds, and discussing the majority of the grants today.
Okay, Katie, I guess where do you want to start?
Yeah, let me just share which grants I'm going to talk about today, and we can start with that. Does that make sense, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
that sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay, so I am going to discuss docket 1194, docket 1196, 1197, 1198, 1199, 1200, 1201, 1264, and 1265. And then Jody and Joseph will cover the remainder that we have to talk about today.
Okay.
Okay, I do have some very brief slides that I can share if that's.
Sure.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Sorry, I couldn't find a pen. So so you said 1189.
Oh, let me go back to my list, sorry.
Yeah.
Where's this? Too many numbers here. 1194
Okay.
through 1201,
Yeah.
and then 1264 and 1265.
Okay. So let me just cover these briefly. So 1194 is a grant for 77,000 from the Department of Labor. 1195 is a grant for 70,000 from State Street Global Advisors. 1196 is a grant for 60,000 from the Department of Labor. 1197 is a grant for 50,000 from the Mass Hire Department of Career Services. 1198 is 34,000 from the Department of Labor. 1199 is 8,900 from the Mass Hire Department of Career Services. 1200 is a $3,000 grant from the Mass Hire Department of Career Services. 1201 is a $1,800 grant from the Department of Labor. 1264 is a $34,000 grant from the Department of Labor, and number 1265 is a $12,000 grant from the Department of Labor. So why don't, if you have a presentation, why don't you?
Yeah, sure. Just one correction. Sorry. 1195, the State Street grant. That's the, Joseph will cover that one. So I misspoke
Okay.
there, but
Okay.
yeah. All right. So let me just make sure I am sharing the right tab. All right, let me just go back. So in a few previous hearings, we've covered some of the ways that we bundle the funds that come through the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development in support of Boston's 2 Mass Hire Career Centers. Some council members were able to join us last week with the ribbon cutting and grand opening of our new Mass Hire Career Center on Malcolm X Boulevard. So this is the funding that supports those 2 sites. So career centers are mandated by federal workforce law to serve as the single front door for job seekers and employers who are looking to connect unemployed Massachusetts residents with training and access to reemployment. So there's a whole range of grants that are distributed through EOLWD, and then the career centers are able to use that funding depending on eligibility. So the funding is overseen by the DOL. There's a lot of regulation regarding the kinds of services that career centers are required to provide. Once they come to Massachusetts, the Department of Career Services adds some more requirements, and they also oversee monitoring compliance and performance statewide. And then each Mass Hire Workforce Board in the state, of which there are 16, receives the funding from the state and then uses those to contract with organizations that serve as the career center operators. We typically have 2 years to spend most federal workforce funds. So you'll see this phrase carry in a few of the grants. And those grants are ones that were originally awarded in FY24. From up until FY24, the EDIC was the served as the fiscal agent for the Mass Hire Workforce Board in Boston, but with the dissolution of the BPDA and the moving of all of our services into the city itself, as of July 1 last year, the city of Boston became the fiscal agent for the Workforce Board. So now our office, as part of the city, manages these funds on behalf of our local Workforce Board. So I know there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy and acronyms here, but just a recap of why we have so many different grants for such a strange amount of dollars. So the PIC serves as Boston's Mass Hire Workforce Board, and the Office of Workforce Development is the fiscal agent. These are our two local career centers, so Mass Hire Downtown Boston, which JVS runs, and Mass Hire Boston Career Center, which is new and managed by ABCD. These are some of the services that they offer and the numbers that they had as a goal of serving in FY25. Over the next few weeks, by the end of the first quarter, we'll have final performance numbers for FY25. But overall, we anticipate that our two centers will serve about 14,000 residents, including of which really a majority are unemployment insurance claimants who have to come in for services as a condition of receiving their unemployment benefits or have to register for services. They can receive services virtually. This is a picture of the JVS Career Center, and we do prioritize organizations that offer close partnerships with community-based organizations. So this is the total amount of our funds that we bundled together and gave to the career centers for FY24. $2.3 million for JVS and $1.9 million for ABCD. So when we look at this list of grants, I can kind of go through what each of them is for. The dislocated worker grants are for eligible adults who are receiving services through one of the core service areas authorized by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The adult program serves individuals and helps employers meet their workforce needs. The goal is to enable workers to obtain good jobs by providing them with job search assistance and training opportunities. So this is some of the core function of the career centers. The adult administration grant is the admin portion of the funds that help us administer these dollars. And again, where it's designated as carry-in, that means that these funds were originally awarded in 2024. The Department of Transitional Assistance, WPP grant, provides services for individuals who are beneficiaries of SNAP or TANF, who are accessing career services, training, and employment. The regional planning grant, so 1198 and 1264, cover the expenses that are associated with Boston's quadrennial regional workforce blueprint planning process, which is a process that happens in coordination with Mass Hire Metro North, so our neighbors Cambridge and Somerville, Malden, and Everett and Chelsea, as well as the South Shore Workforce Board. And that's a comprehensive review of local workforce needs. We look at what are the most in-demand occupations, and then we also look at what training programs exist to fill those occupations, to identify areas of greatest need. So where do we have, very in-demand occupations that don't have sufficient training capacity to meet the need? And I can't figure out how to drop a link when I'm in presentation mode, but when I come off of presentation mode, I should be able to share a link to Boston's workforce planning blueprint. This document helps us understand where our investments of workforce dollars should be made over the next 4 years. So, and then finally, docket number 1265 covers the funded youth programs. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA youth dollars that we get for Boston, are used to fund training programs for young adults ages 18 through 24. We currently have a number of grantees, including More Than Words, Mujeres Unidas Avanzando in Dorchester, Excel Education in Mission Hill, ABCD, and the Notre Dame Education Center in South Boston, which provide comprehensive wraparound services and job training for young adults in that age range. I did skip briefly over dockets number 1199 and 1200, but this is where, as I referred to earlier, the career centers are able to charge different grants depending on the eligibility of the individual that they're serving. So these are particularly for individuals with disabilities or for older adults. This 1200, that SCEP grant, unfortunately, is looking like it won't be renewed in coming years. There was some bad news out of DC yesterday. A lot of these funds are obviously going to change a lot over the next year or two. So we're keeping a close eye on that. I know there were some questions about that at a recent hearing. But those are the details on all of those. And as I said, we bundle these funds and we provide them to the career centers to carry out the work. So I think that's all I have to go over for these. So I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Just quickly, Katie, the three docket numbers, I think that were 1188, 89, and 90, which is We Owe a Youth, ARPA, MDCS, and then the Carrie and Rosia. If you can just cover those ones.
Okay, I don't have those. So I thought we had covered those at a previous hearing. So
yeah, yes, I believe we did, but I think there was a question about those.
Okay, great, yeah. So Rosia is another one of the core, I referenced the 6 core service areas of the career centers. The reemployment is another one of those core ones. So individuals who have been laid off or who have been displaced from their work, who are eligible to come in for retraining, in certain instances, financially supported by the career centers or by these dollars, and services to help connect them to jobs. For We Owe a Youth, I mentioned that briefly, but we really focus on programs that serve 18 through 24-year-old out of school youth and young adults, and really providing long term. So most of our programs are 12 to 18 months and then have another 12 months of follow-up. Support for HiSET or GED completion, support for wraparound services like mental health needs, housing, transportation, support for pregnant and parenting young adults. So really addressing the barriers to employment that young adults have that prevent them from accessing high quality career pathways. So some of those are, as the nonprofits that I mentioned before. So, Joseph, is that all of them, or did I miss one?
The MDC grants, the ARPA upskilling dollars.
And could you just link this to the number, Ivy? So,
So 1188 was the one for 1.2.
1.2.
Yep. The 1189 is 432. Or 423, 132. And then 1190 is 350,000, 158.85.
Okay, and which is the one you just asked Katie about?
423, 132. That is our ARPA/MDCS grants, which looks like it's meant to use to support staff at career centers to help them enroll in education and training programs funded by the ARPA skill grants. So job seekers looking for upskilling just through another federal funding source.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, Katie. Did you have
No, that's okay. So the last one, the Mass Department of Career Services did allocate some ARPA funding for reemployment training and upskilling during the pandemic. Upskilling is something that is often very difficult to address with federal workforce dollars, which are focused on really getting folks back to work as quickly as possible. And we know that there's a lot of need for people who already are employed. And in Boston, since our minimum wage is relatively high compared to the federal poverty line, people who might be employed at a rate that puts them above the federal poverty line, but certainly needing, better access to what would be for Boston a living wage job. So making sure that people who are still employed in a low income setting are able to continue to advance their opportunities to get higher paying jobs. So when we have opportunities to use funds for upskilling, sometimes through the Neighborhood Jobs Trust, sometimes through other city funds, that's always a very valuable thing that helps offset some of this sort of what really is a gap in the federal workforce funding. So the Department of Career Services used some ARPA funds for that sort of project.
Okay, and I guess just, so when you say used ARPA funds, do you mean like to pay for staff or, can you?
So typically what will happen is that the funds are available on a performance basis to serve particular eligible clients. So it wouldn't just be like a general staff support. You would be enrolling individuals to receive funding from that grant. So you would need to enroll individuals to receive who are eligible based on factors including their current employment status, their current income, their current barriers to employment, and to show that they've been enrolled and they have participated in training, and in some cases that they've completed the training and gotten a training related job as sort of that final step. So I don't think it would be just added to staff costs. They have to show enrollments and charge enrollments that are directly related to the eligibility criteria of that particular grant.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. You probably covered this already. I just
No,
wasn't
no.
focused. But so in terms of like, so would it go to the claimant or the person being trained?
Oh, that's a great question. No, it wouldn't go to the claimant. It would go to provide services for that claimant. So you would need to have costs directly associated with that individual. Yeah.
Okay, so 1188 is to fund youth employment programs. And so would that go to pay for it's like 1.2 million for youth employment programs. Would that money go to pay for the work that they're doing or?
Yeah, so for the youth, we have a specific set of requirements that we need to manage. So we are required to spend at least 20% of those funds on work experience for young adults. So that is, once a young person is enrolled as a WIOA youth participant, we have to make sure that the costs are in line with what WIOA requires. So for example, at More Than Words, they meet that work experience requirement by having young adults work in the bookstore that they run. So the bookstore is a social enterprise. They both employ young adults who run the business, and they also use it as sort of a subsidized transitional teaching job moment for many young people for whom this is like one of their first work experiences. We also require that every program that we fund through WIOA Youth has some form of wages or stipend for young people involved. That varies across the different programs and like what their model looks like. For some young adults, it can be challenging. So if, for example, if you have a young adult who's parenting, getting an additional stipend from a training program can kind of wreak havoc with their benefits in some unhelpful ways. So we do leave it up to the discretion of the programs. We also require, like I said, a full year of follow-up support. So programs are able to bill us for that. So there is some money going directly to the student. There's also money for tuition. So if they're doing a training program, one of our programs has set up like a matching fund where a young person who's enrolled, training, going through the process, they're able to earn money that goes into a matched savings account, and they can use that when they graduate to buy a car. That particular training program is supporting young adults through an HVAC training program, and it's kind of hard to work in HVAC if you don't have a driver's license, and in many cases if you don't have a car. So that's a need that they've sought to address with these funds. I wouldn't say that they're flexible, but there is a long list of things that we are allowed to spend this money on. We really try and maximize the financial benefit to the young adult, but also just addressing like a very comprehensive set of wraparound needs that our young adults have. We've had programs that use the money for, getting young people's vaccination records up to date so they can enroll in college. There's just a lot of different things.
Doreen, I think we're getting some background noise maybe from you. You're the only person not on mute. Okay, thanks. Just Katie, so 15 grants. Do you have to write a new grant every year for all these grants? How does this
No,
work?
these are all formula funds. So luckily we don't have to write a grant. We do have to write an annual plan, and we do have to write every 4 years a more comprehensive plan. And then actually this blueprint process is also required. So there's things that we have to do to show locally that we're like very actively engaged with what is the best way to use these funds, but we don't have to write a grant. The state allocates the funds based on a formula that looks at things like the poverty rate, the unemployment rate, a number of factors to say how much will each workforce area in the state get. So it comes to us. We actually just got FY26 numbers last week. It comes to us based on those formulas.
Okay. Anything else, Katie, Joseph, before I kick it to maybe Jody next?
All right, I will skip through to Jody's slides.
Oh, okay. It was Doreen up next. I wasn't. Didn't know which one.
I'm not sure if you called on me.
Sorry,
Councilor Weber.
Councilor Mejia. Before we move on, Councilor Mejia, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to, Katie, if you could, did you mention, and I may have missed it, I know you had talked about more than words earlier in your presentation. We recently did a site visit with them, and they identified some need around housing stability for some of their workers. And I'm just curious, I know that the funds are specifically earmarked, but you know, the matching fund that the student could potentially buy a car, is there any limitations around providing that matching fund for some housing stability efforts?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad to get a chance to talk about it. So we actually did a big pilot project in 2021 with some funding from the when the Office of Housing had the Youth Homelessness Prevention Grant from HUD to provide our young adult training programs with funding to hire a housing navigator to be able to offer down payment assistance or sort of like, you know, the sort of small dollar grants to help a young person either get into housing or stay in housing. And some of our programs have continued to fund those expenses with WIOA youth dollars. I think the only limitation is just the amount of money that's available. It's obviously limited, and the amount of money that it takes to move into a new apartment is, especially for a young adult, like really a huge part of the challenge. So we do encourage programs to use these funding for housing to the extent that it's allowable, and we see it in our costs. But it's definitely, when we look at training programs for 18 through 24-year-olds, I mean, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that it is like the #1 barrier to employment for our young people. Probably not a big surprise. And it also makes it really challenging for young people to qualify for these dollars because you sort of need to prove that you're a resident of a certain area. So definitely points out some of the shortcomings and difficulties of working with federal dollars here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the reason why I ask is because, you know, since coming on the council, I've been a big champion for that age bracket. Sorry, I'm about to get on a flight, so excuse the background noise. But I think that one of the things that we have been also organizing around is looking at, specifically for that age demo, is the entire, the whole child, if you will, right? So the housing, the wraparound services. So those are the sort of things that help support their success. And so I think that working alongside your office at some point, so that we can figure out how we close that gap. Because I know federal dollars are tight right now, but if there are other ways for us to support the housing initiative for these young people, especially for more of the wards, a lot of these young people are either aging out of foster care, aging out of DYS, are in very, you know, traumatic situations. And so the housing stability is definitely a key ingredient for their workforce development success. So happy to be sounding, you know, a partner with you all on this and figuring out how we can help support that need. Thank you, Councilor Weber, for allowing me to speak.
No problem. Thank you. I guess I don't think we have any other counselors here. Councilor Pepin did give us an absence letter. I'd like to acknowledge that. So I don't know, Katie, Joseph, did you want to say anything else about these grants?
Not at
No,
this-
thank you, and sorry for the confusion at the end here about which ones we're covering. Joseph, thanks for stepping in with that list. I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, and then I guess whoever's next in the slide order, I'm not gonna, so
Yep.
1193,
do-
1195, I don't
Yep,
know.
1193, 1195. I'll be taking those ones, Counselor.
Okay.
So 1193 is the $125,000 in form of a grant from the Liberty Mutual Foundation. These funds go to help mitigate climate change and kind of help scale and improve proven strategies. This money will directly go to our Power Core group. That is a training program for 18 to 30-year-olds for folks that are potentially environmental justice impacted, or just are folks that aren't your normal entry point into green jobs. And then 1195 is a $70,000 grant to the Friends of Youth Opportunity Boston, which is the nonprofit entity that runs that is part of YOU. So they have given these funds to help 14 to 24 year old youth who are normally at risk, whether that be justice impacted, housing impacted, or food insecurities. They work intensively with our team for career exploration, and then they are also supported with wraparound services such as a case manager and other needs. Next slide. So just quickly, PowerCore, as I mentioned, is a 10-month training program, 18 to 30 years old. We've had over 120 graduates. About 70, all graduates, 70% have had career uplifting outcomes. So that may be green jobs, quality non-green jobs, trade unions, going to school, or just attending different trainings. Of all these outcomes, 87% of them are linked to green jobs within the Boston area. We have a handful of them who work here at the city, others who work around the city, and a few others, like I said, who have just gone non-green jobs or education. Our average hourly rate is around $27 an hour for these folks. So much above minimum wage, but they are career and family sustaining wages. So the funding from Liberty Mutual will go to training and materials, participant needs such as stipends. They are paid a $550 stipend a week, so about $1,100 every paycheck. And then any kind of training or work-related items, we did notice that some folks come in without boots or without the correct high-vis vests or the capabilities of purchasing these on their own. So these funds would be able to say and go and really work towards that. And including that they have those safety gears, and then equipment and tools for the program as a whole. So, as you know, they may need chainsaws, they may need shovels, they may need gloves, different things like that. So these $125,000 worth of funding partially goes into that. These are funds that are a little bit more flexible than some of our other grant funding that specifically lay out what each dollar and cent needs to go to. So given the flexibility, we kind of keep it open-ended on how these funds will be used to support the youth and the programming as a whole. Next slide, please. And lastly, the funds from the State Street, 90% of it goes to programmatic and youth stipends. The other 10% remaining goes to operational costs. But last year, we had over 258 youth met, 98 meeting the target or adjacent population criteria, which is, as I mentioned, at-risk youth. Could be court involved, could be food injustice involved, housing, any kind of something that would be listed as at risk was met there. They're 14 to 24, really a focus on the 14 to 18-year-old population. 44 of these youth were placed in internships, earning $18 an hour. 40 of them were local partners. 100% of our winter cohort, which is our November through January transition plans group, were 100% transitioned. And out of all these kids, over close to 1,500 hours were directly serviced. So this was career management, resource navigation, case management. Could be a simple drop-in to get a hygiene bag. We meet youth where they are. The YOU office is over at 7 Palmer, right in Nubian Square, so it's easily accessible by bus, train, bike, or even walking distance. So it's a great resource, and these funds really do directly all go back to the youth. We take very little for staff funding. But happy to answer any questions before handing it over to Jody to go over the last docket and kind of answering any things around that one.
Okay, Councilor Mejia, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I will call on you. I guess we've also just been joined by Councilor Durkin. Are you here? Maybe.
Councilor Weber, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Mejia. Just anytime, Councilor Mejia, if you just raise your hand, I'll call on you. You don't have to, I know you're got a lot going on. Councilor Durkin, I guess we're just, we're 3/4 of the way through the dockets. We just heard from Joseph about dockets 1193 and 1195. I don't know if you have any questions. You want to wait to the end?
Thanks, Chair.
Oh, sorry, your audio is freezing.
Incredibly supportive of all these dockets, so just wanted to show my support. But
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Councilor Durkin. I guess my question for Joseph and Katie at this is, what is the federal legislation they're considering now in DC going to do to these programs, or do you have any sense?
So these dollars coming in, at least on these dockets, are private entity dollars, so they won't have any impact, federally. Overall, YOU, ARPA funding does a lot of Power Core. So, obviously there is nervousness with that ending next December, where we are chasing after a number of grants to help alleviate that, but also working with private philanthropy to step in. I think that's kind of the case for a lot of folks in the workspace, is going to private philanthropy as much as possible, but also looking to partner with other states and other entities that kind of adjacently work together to build coalitions, rather than kind of go in it as of our own, given that we could be seen as a state that is not favorable to this federal administration. Has not been outnamed. The only other M state that has been was Minnesota, right, that has been kind of directly called out. But I think our approach is that we're not going to stop the work. We are going to look at whatever other funding, whether that be state, private, or work, dollars to kind of go after and ensure. But YOU is really tied closely to private donation funds, and then things like the Shannon Grant and other funds that are state level. So their impact is less, and then our operating funds help cover the deficit. Whereas Power Core, there is a lot of funding federally that comes in through ARPA that we will be looking to kind of fundraise for and create on. And also there are NOAA grants that are tied into Power Core, and then some forestry services, which, Councilor Weber, you're probably aware of. We had one already taken away due to the nature that they don't want trees in neighborhoods that don't have trees but need them, as they've said. So they don't want urban polarization, because they tend to target, or they were putting in diverse neighborhoods, and diverse is a bad word, according to the federal government.
Yeah, I would just say for the federal formula funds that we talked about, the proposal on the table right now, still on the table, I think, as far as I know this morning, but who knows what happened in the last 45 minutes, is that all of these different buckets of money will be combined into one single block grant program, and that the overall amount is going to be significantly reduced, potentially by about 30%. So I've heard different things about whether or not the block grant program piece will survive. But that's the idea, is that I think, as far as I understand, that basically there'll be like a really significant restructuring of how federal workforce dollars work. So we're tracking that really closely. Jody's tracking that very closely, especially trying to understand what some of those priorities might look like. Of course, it has several layers of rulemaking to sift through before it comes to us. But of course, we're sort of anticipating a pretty significant cut to these federal formula dollars starting for FY27.
Okay, so can you just explain to me how a grant got cut off for trees? In terms of how this is all going to play out, it would just help me. Thanks.
So we, one of the grants that we had got was a pass-through grant from Philadelphia. They were the main recipient, and then they gave us pass-through dollars to our Power Core program to help with urban forestry and planting trees in, neighborhoods that have been part of the, have seen environmental justice. So it was a coalition through the DC Core Network. So maybe, planting trees out on Dot Ave, as we know, is an area that needs trees, given, a number of how densely populated it is, but there's not a lot of tree canopy. In the great thinking of the federal government, they have said that these funds are not needed because they are, for whatever reason, against putting trees in neighborhoods that need trees for environmental justice, or whether it be just to improve tree canopy. The first, notion of this that we saw was the cancellation of the Arbor Day Foundation funds, which were used for the same kind of usage. So it's kind of climate change mitigation of CO2 gases and greenhouse gases. And they thought that Arbor Day was the first one that got axed in late February, and then in early April we got notice that our funding from the Core Network was going to be canceled. We then got a subsequent letter from that same group maybe 2.5 weeks after, stating that it was actually not them cutting it, but the federal government completely canceling their grant terms as a whole, thus them having to rescind any further funding of our grant. We were able to bill them through the end of May, I believe, for any services that we had provided up until that point, which was about 16,000 of the 300 or so, 325 I think was the exact number that was originally per year. Overall, about an $860,000 grant overall, but we only were able to bill $16K before the cancellation notice came.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like when they've gone through like the National Institute of Health Science funding, and they just look for anything with the word diversity in it, or the Control F things, and to try to cut. Anyway, so okay, I think we've been joined by Councillor Flynn. Hello, Councillor Flynn. We're about 75% of the way through the grants, but as they come up, we've been asking questions. I don't know if you have anything you want to say. You want to wait till the end, Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have anything that I want to highlight right now. I do want to say thank you to the administration team that is here for their work, for their professionalism. And I know I missed some of the conversation earlier tonight, and the next day I'm going to review the video and learn as much as I can. But my main point is I want to say thank you to the administration team that is here.
Okay, thanks. And Councillor Durkin, I see you're up and running, but I'm assuming if you want to raise your hand, just I'll call on you. Yeah, okay, that's a hand. So I'm calling on you.
Thanks, Councillor Weber, and I'm sorry I was late. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think these questions that you're asking, Chair Weber, are really interesting given the situation that we're in. So like Councillor Flynn, I'll be watching the beginning of this hearing and grateful to the administration and supportive of all of these grants. Thank you for having reviewed the dockets. I am supportive of all these grants and look forward to them being moved at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, I don't know who's running the show, Joseph or we haven't heard from Jody yet, or Doreen. I don't know if who's up next. 1192.
That's me. Thank you. Thank you, counselors. Thanks so much for having us here today. I'll be covering docket 1192, which is message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $200,000 in the form of a grant for the Boston Climate Jobs Alliance awarded by Citizens Bank Foundation to be administered by the Office of Workforce Development. Just to give a little bit of background and context, this grant and the Boston Climate Jobs Alliance directly comes from the work that we've been doing at the Office of Workforce Development to prepare Boston residents to be with climate-ready workforce skills and jobs. So we know Boston is uniquely vulnerable to the impact of climate change. We could likely to see 40 inches of sea level rise by 2070 and potentially annualized losses of coastal and river flooding of up to $1.4 billion per year. We've seen the hottest decade on record, and last week certainly was a good example of the kinds of increased heat that our city is dealing with. But as we know, the city has done a lot of planning, and we have invested a lot of time and energy on creating plans for mitigation, decarbonization, and resilience. And in fact, we have, for our entire 47 miles of coastline, we have a plan to address and create infrastructure to prevent flooding. We've got plans focused on rising temperatures and our urban forest plan. Even though, as Joseph pointed out, we've lost some federal funding for that, the plan is there, and we are finding other resources to ensure that we can implement. All of these plans lead to city investments, and these investments lead to jobs. So we at the Office of Workforce Development and Work Empowerment Cabinet have been working hard to ensure that we can create pathways to these jobs for Boston residents. And not too long ago, we won a $9.8 million grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to create the Boston Climate Jobs Alliance. It's a coalition that includes employers, colleges, unions, and other partners to address the threats of coastal flooding, sea level rise, storm surge, while generating a new sustainable and equitable workforce. And the key goal here, and that's why it's in red, is that our work is ultimately aimed at training 645 people and placing 484 in 1,200 jobs committed by 13 employers over the next, it says 4, but it's at this point now 3 years. Citizens Bank approached us. This was a competitive grant, but they approached us to join the Boston Climate Jobs Alliance, and they gave a grant to the Office of Workforce Development for $200,000 over 2 years. It has 3 purposes. We'll be partnering with a nonprofit to provide youth-led marketing and design work to develop messaging and marketing about the Boston Climate Jobs Alliance. We will be and we are working on this now, have a partner for job development and job coaching to support folks in understanding which of the various pathways they may want to follow and supporting them throughout training to job placement. And finally, a very big priority of Citizens Bank, they are contributing to the child care fund that we have for the Boston Climate Jobs Alliance to support an additional 10 child care vouchers for trainees. These can be used throughout the training process or allowing people to use it in the first couple of months of their job placement as well. And the jobs are primarily in several areas of strategies around coastal and climate resilience. They're in water utilities, stormwater management, flood, emergency management, and building services, sustainable building services. And we have training that began in January. So our first cohorts are going to be graduating and being placed soon. And I'll stop there and take any questions.
Okay, thank you. If any of my colleagues here have any questions, they can raise their hands. I'm not going to call on you individually if you want to speak. I guess, Jody, my similar question to you in terms of what the impact is of this federal budget situation. You know, you try. Can this continue? Obviously, from Citizens Bank, that'll continue. But will your program be able to continue to reach 4 years old? You know, with what we're
very fortunate. This grant has already been put into our account in the Treasury. Of course, you know, anything can happen. We are watching very closely. We are making sure that we are in compliance with all grant terms. We meet regularly with our program officers, and we are confident as one can be in this moment, that this grant will be available to us through the full grant term of August 2028. Of course, we are keeping a very close eye. As Katie explained, this has been a very challenging time for a department that relies on federal funding as a huge part of the work that we do and the work that we do to fund our partners in providing workforce development services here in Boston. So we are keeping a very close look on all of this. We are working with experts that we know are in DC and keeping an eye on things for us. But this grant is fully in our account in the Treasury. It was in our account in the Treasury before the administration changed. So we are feeling confident, and again, as confident as one can feel.
Okay, and then I guess how do you go, or who chooses which employers are participating in the program?
These employers, the 13 employers listed here, were part of, and when we were first writing the grant to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we started with a labor market analysis to understand where coastal resilience jobs were likely to be in Boston, and then used that to approach employers. The employers for this grant are actually largely public sector employers in the city itself stepping up. There's two reasons for that. One, this is where the jobs are going to be. Boston Housing Authority, Boston Water and Sewer Commission, the Streets Cabinet, Parks, but these are city jobs are also good quality and oftentimes union jobs with family sustaining wages. So we are always looking to support and add additional employers. We also have a number of employers who are landscaping companies, because one of the key areas of this coastal and flood resilience is green infrastructure installation and maintenance. One of the key contractors for the city of Boston to do this work, Parterre Ecological, has come on board as an employer. They already have a relationship with Power Corps, and they're committed to hiring a number of people who graduate from this program, which is really great considering they are a contractor for the city of Boston, and they are going to be utilizing folks who have trained through this program.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Mejia, I see your hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jody. It's great to see you. And I'm happy to hear that we're collaborating with State Street. I just think as we continue to navigate this political climate, you know, our local partners are going to be the ones that are really going to help us stand in the gap. But I'm just curious in terms of just kind of like looking at the development landscape here, especially in East Boston, the Seaport. What conversations, if any, have you all, or even considering having with some of our developer partners in terms of these job opportunities that exist in the green space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Of the 1,200 jobs committed, about 500 are in the building trades, and that's largely through Suffolk and the developer of the Dorchester Bay development. And frankly, a lot of future jobs in the climate work are all focused on building trades and infrastructure. So we're always working really closely and working with trying to ensure pathways to the building trades for our for folks in Boston. And some of those jobs are focused on that development, though the trainers that are funded through the grant are largely not the trades. The trades have their own separate funding, but we are constantly looking for pathways and ensuring that our Boston residents have pathways into good jobs. And I think folks heard about the really exciting project labor agreement where around the renovation of Boston Public Schools, which builds a pathway for 50 young people every year from Madison Park High School into pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs in the trades. And that is largely through green, energy efficient upgrades, the investments we're making in our Boston public schools to bring them up to green, make them more green and efficient. And now we're ensuring that that investment is also creating a pathway to the trades.
Thank you for that. And just one more, Chair, if you don't mind. One more question. I'm curious, Jody, specifically because we've been speaking to, you had mentioned some city departments that will also be able to benefit from this, these grant opportunities. I'm hearing a lot from folks who are on the lower scale pay rate, and I'm just curious, kind of like what we're thinking about that in terms of a pathway towards helping to close that wealth gap, particularly for folks who want to stay here in the city but can't because of their limited income. And I'm just curious what, if anything, can be done in regards to kind of like those wages to keep our city's residents here in Boston and thriving.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The jobs that were committed through the city departments, we measured against our living wage standards. So all of the jobs that we are training and placing for all have or meet our living wage guidelines. Efforts to ensure that we're raising the bar, I think, happens outside of our department, but we always make sure that when we're investing training dollars, that we're leading people to career pathways that provide family sustaining wages.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Chair, I don't have any further questions for Jody, and I'll be here for the rest of the 25% of the time that we have left.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet, Joseph?
I believe, Councilor, that's all the dockets that we had on the list for
Okay.
today.
Yeah. I've also. I think we've covered all the dockets. Anything you want to add, Joseph, Jody, Doreen, Katie?
Just thank you for all your hard work, councilors, and your support. And as we, go through tough times and get work very collaboratively, as Councilor Mejia mentioned, with not only the state, but as with the city and other departments and you're in the council group here to make sure that, our number one goal is to serve as many residents of Boston as possible. And just looking forward to continuing working with you and your respective staffs as we work through kind of what is a ever-changing norm. For all we know, in the last hour that we've met here, sweeping changes could have been done without our notice or so. Just thank you for all your hope and your support over the last years and continued support as we continue our mission of making sure that residents of Boston have opportunities to either upskill or go into career paths that are family wage sustaining. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you. I know, some of these grants are very small and they would just usually come before us and get approved. But, I just thought by sort of pooling these together, we could just talk about the whole sort of range of things you're working on and what we use this money for. And like you said, Joseph, like now, perhaps more than ever, it's worthwhile highlighting what we do with these funds and how they can be put to good use when we have them, and what I guess the administration in DC is with, standing up against, for us being able to do. So I want to thank you for the time. It really helps me, and I'd like to think it helps my colleagues also. I think it does. But I appreciate putting this all together on relatively short notice, and your presentation. I'm just, I think Councilor Mejia, you're the only one here, but again, if you wanted to say something, feel free.
Of course, I always want to say something, Councilor Weber. I worked really hard to get into this seat, so not utilize my voice. Hello. But no, I wanted to just thank you all for your hard work. This is definitely a passion of mine, workforce development. I started my work with youth development and also working with women who are transitioning out of welfare into jobs. And so all of the stuff that you do is aligned with my purpose in life. And so really just excited to have the opportunity to hear what you are doing, how you're doing it, and the investments that you're making. So just wanted to thank you all for your leadership, and I will be seeing you out in these streets. Thank you.
Okay, Shane, is anyone public testimony?
No, we're all set, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our panelists. I'm just trying to find the closing paragraph here. So I just want to thank the panelists for participating in this hearing, and thank my colleagues who made the time to be here. I'd also like to thank Shane and Ethan from Central Staff for their assistance with today's hearing. So this is the hearing on docket numbers 1188 to 1190, 1192 to 1201, and docket numbers 1264 and 1265. It's now adjourned. I couldn't find the app. I'm just going to end scene, and we will finish there, Ethan. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Okay, so thank you very much.